Hello, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. Today, we're going to learn about money and what are some of the functions of money and what kind of money do we have circulating in the economy today. So, to understand what money is, it helps to understand what are the functions of money. So, what kind of things that money can do? So, why do we use money? One of the reasons why we use money is that it is a method or a medium of exchange, which means that we use money to buy goods or services. This helps because money has acceptability. So basically, everyone, if I go to a store within the US, if I pay with US dollars, people accept US dollars, and so that is used as a medium of exchange. We can also use money, like if I want to sell something, I can accept money to, like as an exchange of, like if I want to sell something. And in the US, US dollars are accepted. Now, if I wanted to use Canadian dollars in America, that may not be accepted in most places of the US. So acceptability depends upon the region. However, let's say if I have US dollars, I may be able to use it at a duty free shop in an airport in another country. So, medium of exchange has, it can be different in different areas. The other function of money is basically a unit of account, which is basically we measure value of a product using money. So if I say something is, let's say if a price is $10 versus another price is, let's say, $200, I know which one is more expensive. Money helps us to understand how expensive a good is, what is the value of a product, because the dollar value of a product or the price of a product helps us to understand what is the value of that product. I mean, I'm repeating here, but you get the drift here. It's like basically, if something is $10 and another thing is $200, I know the $200 good is 20 times more expensive than the $10 good. We also use it for a store of value, which means that if I keep money in a bank or as cash, I can use it in the future. It doesn't basically decay right away. It does not get wasted right away. Now, although inflation can reduce the value of money, it does not render money as unusable. So basically, it's not saying that, yes, inflation does eat away the value of money over time, but if I have $100 today, I can still use that same $100 in a transaction in a year time or in 2 years time. I may be able to buy fewer goods, but I can still use that currency for trading. Finally, in some books they have this. It is used as a means of deferred payment, which means that if I take a loan, then I pay back the loan with money. Or if I buy something in credit, I pay back the price later using money. So I use money to pay off my debt, to, let's say if I want to buy something on credit, I use money for that. So I'm using money also to fulfill some of my credit obligations. So this helps us to understand what can be used as money. So US dollars are used because in the US it is accepted as a medium of exchange. People, when I go to the store, people accept it as money. It is when I go to any store, the shelves have prices quoted in US dollars, which helps me understand what the value of the product is. I can save US dollars in my bank or as cash, and I can use it later. And if I take a loan or if I buy something on credit, I can pay back that amount using US dollars. So examples, so US dollar is money in this case. Now, currency is not always money. Other products were used as money. So for example, the cacao seeds were used as money in or as currency by Aztecs. So it helped to fulfill that all these four functions in the island of Yap. Huge boulders, like huge pieces of rocks, are used as money. So it doesn't have to be portable. You don't have to move it around. It's sitting in one corner of an island. Someone owns it, and then that boulder is used as money in their daily lives, or was used. I don't know if it's still used today, but it was used definitely as money. So anything that fulfills all these functions can be used as money. Now, why is money needed? Money really helps in the facilitation of trade. It really helps us when we want to buy and sell something. And how does that help us? Well, without money, we would need to find something that would be acceptable for trade. So let's say money did not exist. Let's say in the US dollar did not exist. Now, how would I go about buying products? So I would need to find something that would be acceptable to the seller of the product. So let's say I want to buy a loaf of bread. So I go to this person who is willing to sell bread. Now, I would need something to trade with that person so that that person would accept my payment and in return would give me bread. So as a result of that, like, what would be acceptable for trade? Well, in that case, if there is no money, in the case where there is no common money, I would need to barter. So I would need to barter, which means that I would need to provide some other good in exchange of bread. Let's say I have coffee beans with me. So I would go to the bread person and be like, okay, here, give me some of your bread, give me 2 loaves of bread, and then in return, I'll give you a pound of coffee beans. However, in this case, there needs to be a double coincidence of wants, which means that if I have coffee beans and I need to buy bread, I would need to find someone who is selling bread and who is willing to accept coffee beans as a method of payment. Now, of course, this would lead to a lot of searching, because what if that person doesn't want to accept coffee beans as a method of payment? Then I would need to go about finding a person who has bread at supply and is willing to accept coffee beans as a method of payment. So this then increases transaction cost and search cost. So basically, I have to search for somebody, and then I have to figure out what is the exchange rate. How many pounds of coffee beans equal to 1 pound or 1 loaf of bread? And then we have to fix all those things and in order to find out if we can trade or not. Now, if there is an acceptable method of payment, it doesn't have to be currency or cash. But if, let's say, we all decided that maybe breadsticks or something else can be used as currency, then with money or with some kind of currency, or some people use beads back in the day, or shells, or cacao beans, or something else, then this double coincidence of wants is not necessary. Because that other person, let's say cacao beans are accepted as money, then if I want bread, I can go to that bread seller and give that person my cacao beans, I get the bread, and that person knows with that cacao beans, even if they don't like chocolate, they can use those beans and buy something else which they like. They may like maybe to buy a sweater, and they can use those cacao beans to buy a sweater. So this money then, with money, trade is facilitated. So, and if you remember, when we were younger, we probably used some kind of barter during lunchtime. If I had a sandwich and I didn't want the sandwich, and my friend had a pizza, I may want to barter that with that person. But in order to barter, that person with pizza may want will have to want a sandwich if that person wanted to trade with me. Otherwise, that trade would not work, even though I really wanted that person's pizza. So money does help to reduce trade barriers when it comes to like transaction and search costs, and helps us to trade much more easily. Now, what are the different types of money? We have initially, back in the day, in history, and even until the 1960s and early 70s, we had something called commodity money, which is basically money with intrinsic value. Which means that this value, the money had, the currency that we used for trading, had some kind of value. So if you think about gold coins, these were used as money. So if I melt the coin and repurposed it, it still retained its value. So the gold coin had some value in it because gold was valuable to us. So if I melted the coin and made, like, let's say a rectangular block, that would still retain its value. So commodity money, and in case of also like cacao beans, is commodity money because it has some intrinsic value. We can use that beans to make chocolate, so it has some value embedded in it. But later in the 1970s, people realized that, the economy is growing so fast, we cannot rely on gold as money anymore because there isn't enough gold supply to be used as money. So governments then moved to what we call fiat. And this money is basically what we use in almost all countries in the world. This money does not have an intrinsic value. So if you think about $100 bill, if I shredded it, basically that money has lost its value. So I cannot put it back together and get the value back. So the paper on which the $100 bill was printed does not have a $100 value. The $100 has value because the US government says it has value. So the US is the only country in the world, I believe, where all the currencies have the same shape. So $1 and $100 have the same dimensions. In other countries, the bigger the denomination of the currency, the bigger is the size of that currency. But in the US, $1 dimensions and $100 dimensions is exactly the same. So $1 has a value of $1 because $1 was printed on that paper. $100 has a value of $100 because $100 was printed on that paper. So fiat money is what we use, and we consider $100 to have a value of $100 because the government says it has that value. And this is not just unique to US. Every other country in the world, almost every other country uses fiat money as their currency. Now, within that, we have different, these are the two types of money, but within fiat money that we have right now, we have other methods of measuring currency. So what constitutes as currency? So what is constituting as currency? So we have two measures of currency. One is what we call M1. M1 is anything that is cash or as close to cash as possible. So cash, coins, money in my checking account are all part of M1. Traveler's checks is also considered M1, but very few people use traveler's checks nowadays, so we really don't have as much traveler's checks. So I don't want to use that as an example. M2 now is a little bigger definition of money. M2 is basically, it includes everything in M1, so includes all the things in M1. So basically cash, coins, money in my checking account, plus money that is slightly harder to cash. So basically for those, it would be something like money in savings account, like certificate of deposits or CDs. These are savings that we cannot access directly. If I promise a bank that I won't withdraw my money for 2 years or 5 years, they may give me a higher return or interest rate on that money. So those money is a little difficult to convert to cash. Money in money market mutual funds. This is another type of account that's part of M2. And other things is like any kind of deposit that is not easily accessible. It may take a couple of days or a day to withdraw the money from. So that's M2. Now, how big is M1 and M2 in the US? So how big is M1 and M2 in the US? So for that, let's go to the website of Fred. And in Fred, all I need to do is write M1 and enter, and M1 pops up. So I can click on M1 and I can see how big is M1 right now. So let's look at the newer values. So we can see that M1 it was around 3.6, 3.5 trillion dollars for the most part of 2020, 2019, 2018. And then around the pandemic, a lot of money was given to people in order to spur consumption. So M1 went up to $15.9 trillion by May of 2020, and then it continued to increase to $20.9 trillion by April of 2022. And then it started to fall. And so by April of 2023, it fell to $18.9 trillion. And so this is M1. What about M2? Well, if I search Fred for M2, M2 pops up here, and I can see M2 have a similar trend. Of course, M2 includes M1 plus other values, so M2 will be slightly higher. As we can see, M2 is around 2018, it was $14 trillion. And then during the pandemic, it increased again because M1 increased to 18 trillion, and then kept on going up to 21 trillion, and then fell to some number to 20.9 trillion by April of 2020. So this is M1 and M2. Hopefully this was beneficial, and I will see you at a later video. Have a good day. Goodbye.